Chapter 13. I buried him in the hay. There is only one hard part, pulling the pitchfork out of his back. I folded his arms across his chest as I had Stan's, and like Stan, Pepper also looked peaceful. Then I went for a long walk through the night. The lights had finally failed and the darkness was irrevocable. I walked in Stan's prophetic dream, yet I never turned to see if I was being followed. I didn't care if I was. My pain and sorrow were so great I was shattered. In a way, I was happy the streets were deserted, and that I had no one I had to talk to. The town's emptiness fit my soul. Both were black and filled with agony. I ended up at Betty Sue's house. Perhaps it was because it was where it had all begun. I felt no special danger. There was no one left to kill me. I wasn't going to arm myself. I wasn't going to smoke around a gasoline pump. I went inside and sat at Betty Sue's desk. There were pen and paper in her desk drawer, and a candle and a match. I lit the candle and opened the window wide so I could feel the wind and sand on my face and arms. Outside, I could barely see the street. The sand was sweeping Salem away. I picked up the pen and began to write, 'cause there was nothing else to do. I sit alone in a dead world. The wind blows hot and dry, and the dust gathers like particles of memory waiting to be swept away. So I wrote this story, and now it is done. I don't know if anyone will ever find it and read it. I don't know if I care. I just hope that Betty Sue is really dead and never returns to the land of the living. If she does return, I don't know what could stop her. My hand is tired. I wish to put my pen down and rest, but I don't dare close my eyes. I don't know what I'd awaken to, if anything. I suppose she could make it so that I die in my sleep. What is that? I hear a sound. It must be the wind. Yet it doesn't sound like the wind. It sounds like footsteps. Approaching. Oh, God. Someone is opening the front door of Betty Sue's house. She stands in the doorway of her bedroom and stares in at me. She hasn't spoken, but has indicated that I am to keep writing. She is taller than I remembered, but then I notice her high black boots. Her coat is long and dark, made of soft leather. It is really more of a cape. Her incredible red hair shines like fire. Her lips are almost as red, set in a line that I cannot fathom. She is amused by me, that much is clear, but she also seems rather melancholy. There is no mistaking the power that radiates from her. This is her place, and she knows it. She approaches and sits on the bed. "Write as I speak," she says. "Record everything." "All right," I say. I write down the words. Her green eyes follow me closely. That is another thing we have in common, besides red hair. I could stare in a mirror and see her eyes, except hers are deeper than mine and colder. "Is there anything you want to ask me?" she asks. "Yes," I say. "Go ahead." "Are we dead?" The question brings a smile to her lips. Her face is so pale I fear the smile will crack it, but it doesn't. Perhaps Betty Sue can still feel joy. I don't know. "We are born dead," she says. "It is just a matter of time before we realize it." She touches her belly. The rare one realizes it even before emerging from the womb. "I don't understand." "I was the one in your womb. I came back for you. You were pregnant with me." She pauses and her smile shrinks. "Mother." "You came back to kill me?" I ask. "Yes, but to do that, you had to kill me first." "I had to decide to have an abortion?" "Yes, you had a choice not to. Your choice opened the door." "And sealed tight the lid?" "Yes," she says. "But I didn't have the abortion. I stopped it." "Did you?" Her question brings ice to my guts. "Yes, I know I stopped it." She does not want to argue the point. "Why?" "I thought of you," I said. "What a waste it was that you threw your life away. It made me change my mind." "You thought of me because I was with you then." "Why do you want to kill me? What did I ever do to you?" She pauses. She has to think, and that scares me. Her thoughts are dangerous. "How many times have you been in love?" "Once," I say. "Would you believe I could be in love?" she asks. "No." My answer does not offend her. She lowers her head. Her smile is now entirely gone. "I loved Pepper," she says. "Why?" She shrugs. "Why did you love him, Roxanne?" I shiver as she says my name. I know she can curse it just by speaking it out loud. She does not need her pen and paper. "I don't know." She nods. "It is that way with the best of things and the worst of things." She gestures around us to the wind and the sand, the starless sky. "This is all a mystery." "Even to you?" She chuckles softly. "Not so much to me." Who the hell are you? What are you? She sits still, her back straight. I am a storyteller. She looks out the window at the black night. God is a storyteller. We've been calling you a witch all day. Are you a witch? I am human. But a human can be many things. A human can be a witch, a sorcerer, a saint, a god. What are you to me right now? I told you, your child. She pauses again. You made me who I am. How? What did I do? A shade of sorrow returns to her face. I went to visit Pepper the night you two were in the barn. I saw you in each other's arms. I have to swallow. I didn't know. She takes a deep breath and lets it out slowly. I think I lost my mind right then. I felt such pain. She looks at me. You felt that same pain just before you pushed him onto my fork and afterward. She grins suddenly. And that's how you made this situation. Do you understand? No. She gestures again to our empty surroundings. What would this world be if one child who was born had never been born? Would it be the same world? It would be pretty much the same, I would think, unless the kid was supposed to be president or something important. Betty Sue speaks strongly. No, that's not true. That is the mystery. It would not be the same at all. It would be nothing. She pauses and points to her papers and pens. This world belongs to me alone. It would have been nothing if I had not been born. I sat here and created it. I wrote your story. I let you finish it. All my thoughts of you and Helter and Pepper and Stan and Leslie, they were inside my head. I could make them any way I wanted. I could make you any way I wanted. That wasn't true until today. She nods. I had to capture you in my jar. She speaks seriously. I am the author. I am the storyteller. I am all that there is. I am offended. But you're not God? She throws back her head and laughs. Maybe I am. Or maybe I am the devil. What's the difference to someone like me? Then she shakes her arm slightly, and suddenly, like magic, there is a long silver knitting needle in her right hand. She holds it up to the quivering candle. The sharp point glistens like a deadly star. Queen Beetle, I say, and I am so scared. She nods. You changed your mind too late, Roxanne. No. I clasp my abdomen. Inside, the cold aches. No. Yes. She leans toward me, her needle in her hand. The procedure was already underway. Now you are bleeding. You are hemorrhaging. The doctor is worried. He fears he is about to lose you. And he is right. That's not true, I cry. But the cold in my guts is getting worse. It spreads like an evil flame from a black abyss. My internal organs shudder. I am having trouble breathing. It is a strain to keep writing, but I fear if I stop writing, my story will be over. She will poke me with her needle. She nods as I think this. If you set down the pen, she says, I will stab you in the belly. But I can't keep writing, I protest. She wets her lower lip with her tongue. That is the difference between you and me. You had only one story to tell. She stops and grins once more. I have millions. No, I cry. She doesn't wait for me to drop the pen. She takes me by surprise. She stabs me with her needle. It goes through my shirt, deep into my belly, into my child. Blood gushes around the wound. I feel the cold inside my heart, the pain. It is a numbing pain, and it spreads. The outside wind begins to die down. I no longer feel the sand on my face. The candle flickers. The room grows dark. I have to put down my pen. The last thing I see is Betty Sue's green eyes looking at me. There is cruelty in them, and compassion. I don't know which is worse. Suddenly, I am very tired. Epilogue. Paul Pointzel, better known as Pepper, sat in the waiting room of the clinic with the mean nurse and a copy of People magazine. The nurse wouldn't talk to him or look at him. She obviously hated all the men who brought in their knocked-up women. The People magazine was ancient. Several of the celebrities who babbled in the pages about how cool they were now, that they had kicked drugs and booze, were now appearing on game shows trying to earn extra bucks. Pepper hoped he never got in People magazine. He worried it might bring him bad luck. But Pepper was worrying anyway. He loved Roxanne, and he hated bringing her to this horrible place at this horrible time of the morning. A dozen times at the motel they had just come from, he had almost told her to call the whole thing off. Let's keep the baby, he had wanted to say. It will work out. Who knows? He might grow up to be the President of the United States. Of course, Roxanne was convinced she was carrying a girl. Pepper couldn't believe his bad luck. Roxanne was the second girl he had gotten pregnant in the last 2 months. Betty Sue McCormick had been the first, and boy had that been a mistake. The weird thing about the whole mess was that he hadn't even liked Betty Sue. Yet he had gone out with her a dozen times and had slept with her twice. Once before he was involved with Roxanne, and once after. The second time had been the real killer. He had had no intention of even talking to her again. He was no two-timer, never had been. But then she had called him and told him to come over, and before he knew it, he was on his motorcycle, flying down the streets. She was home alone and wasted no time in taking off her clothes and his. But afterward, he got out of there as fast as he could. He went home and showered for half an hour. Just the smell of her on him had made him feel unclean. She laughed as he left. She said, "I've got you now." Then, a week later, Betty Sue came up to him at school and told him she was carrying his baby and was a few weeks pregnant. She must have conceived the first time they made love. She looked so happy that he was sure she would insist on keeping the child. But then she cackled when he asked her about her plans. "Don't worry about Salt, Pepper," she said. "She's not going to live a ripe old age." He hadn't understood that she meant to kill herself along with the fetus, but she committed suicide that very night, and whatever guilt he felt about her death, he felt twice as much relief. Sleeping with her had been like smuggling with a maggot. She was bad news, that Betty Sue. Their child would probably have grown up to be a serial killer. The tall, stern doctor who was performing Roxanne's abortion suddenly appeared in the doorway. "Call Dr. Klein," he ordered the nurse. "Immediately. Tell him it's an emergency. I want him here in 5 minutes." Pepper jumped out of his seat. "Is something wrong with Rox?" The doctor threw him a weary look. "There are complications. Wait here. We'll take care of it." The strength went out of Pepper's legs, and he had to sit down. The People magazine fell off his lap and onto the floor. Something else Betty Sue had said to him the last time they had spoken came back to him right then. He didn't know why. Surely it had nothing to do with Roxanne and her situation. Yet, just the memory of it was enough to curl Pepper into a helpless ball of fear. "Your seed is like a disease inside me," Betty Sue had said. "It's a catching disease. I might cough and give it to someone else. I might do that on purpose. I'm sure whoever catches it next will die." "Please, God," he whispered. He thought if Roxanne died, he would die with her. She meant that much to him. He never knew how right he was. For Roxanne Wells, better known as Rox, the doctor had only been gone a little while. Not the long time she had imagined before, but what was that before, she asked herself. Suddenly, there was something in her mind she couldn't quite put her finger on. A memory that was more than a memory, and somehow less. Something long and complex. How odd that she should forget it altogether, especially when it had just come to her. It was as if she had gone to a movie and then been asked immediately afterward what the movie had been about, and she responded, "I can't remember." Not a single scene. All she would know is that she had seen a show. "It must be the shots they gave me," she thought. "I am not losing my mind. It is not the end of the world." Something about the end of the world. That's what her strange dream had been about. She remembered then that Leslie, Stan, Helter, and Pepper had been in it, plus Betty Sue. Poor Betty Sue. She should never have killed herself. What a waste of life, she thought. Life was so precious. But this time, Roxanne did not notice anything peculiar in the fact that she could contemplate the sanctity of life, while simultaneously cutting short the life of a fetus. The strange liquid feeling in her guts continued to grow stronger. It wasn't painful, just odd, like her dream of the end of the world. All these things could have been happening to another Roxanne. She was just lying there in her back with her legs in stirrups, watching colored images on the fluffy white clouds that drifted by. She didn't feel like a direct participant in the drama. But the drama was just getting started. The doctor returned and he looked worried. He began to work on her again, and when he lifted his hands to collect another surgical instrument, she was surprised to see that his plastic gloves were soaked with blood. He swiftly strapped a blood pressure wrap on her arm and pumped it up. His black eyes grew big. "Roxanne," he said, "how do you feel?" She yawned. "Dreamy? Am I almost done?" He reached for a bottle of solution and a fresh needle. "Have you ever had any trouble with excessive bleeding?" "Like a hemophiliac?" "No." He stabbed a tiny bottle with a needle and then stuck the needle into the IV. "You can't be one of those. Hemophilia only affects males." He put a hand to his head. "This has got to have a reason." "Huh?" "Just relax." "All right." She couldn't be bothered talking anyway. She felt too sleepy. A nice nap right now sounded wonderful. Then she felt a stab of pain deep in her guts. Its suddenness was matched only by its fury. It was as if someone, a witch maybe with long red hair and bony fingers, had taken a knitting needle and poked her right through the belly button. Roxanne felt her heart skip as the pain throbbed from her midsection into her head. She let out a blood-curdling scream. The doctor jerked upright. The mean nurse came running through the door. "Where is Dr. Klein?" the doctor snapped. "He's on his way," the nurse said. "Is she going to be all right?" "Not if we don't stop this bleeding." The doctor reached for a swab of cotton balls. He picked up a scalpel. "We have to prepare for anesthesia. I'm going to have to open her up." Open me up, Roxanne thought. That didn't sound good. But at least her pain was swiftly receding, as quickly as it had come. She didn't know if it was because the doctor had pumped more medicine into her IV, or because whatever it was that was wrong inside had already burst open and the pressure had been relieved. She just hoped the river running from the broken dam was not filled with her blood. For the first time, she wondered if she was going to die. And just that thought was enough to crack open the entire world of death. Betty Sue whispered in her ear, "You can get up now, Rox. You can walk out into the waiting room and drive back to Salem with your pepper and pretend that you never tried to murder your baby. But you will find few people there, only those who have displeased me, those who are already as good as dead. Then you will watch them die, one by one, until I come to you again in the black of night in the form of Queen Beetle and put my needle in your belly and make you bleed again and again and again, until you realize that I am a devil so powerful, even God leaves me alone to play as I wish." Roxanne sat up and pulled her legs out of the stirrups. The doctor and the nurse did not mind. They continued to work frantically with a reclining bloody mess that seemed to have little to do with her. Roxanne scooted off the table and reached for her clothes. Her green medical gown was filthy with dark stains, and she was happy to be rid of it. Once dressed in her own clothes, she felt much better. She stood up and walked out of the room without even a glance back. But she thought she heard the doctor saying something to the nurse like, "We're losing her." She didn't care. She was remembering what had happened the last time she had changed her mind about having the abortion. Suddenly, she remembered the whole story. She had written it all down after all, and never mind what that bitch Betty Sue thought. Pepper was sitting huddled over in his chair when she opened the door to the waiting room. He was crying, and at first she thought he was upset about a story he had read in the People magazine that was lying at his feet, but then she realized that Pepper never cried, not unless... It was then she understood that he was crying about her. Roxanne whirled around and looked down the hall, back the way she had come. Off to her left, she could see the doorway that led to the operating table, where she knew the doctor and the nurse continued to work frantically on her. But straight down the hall, near the end, the walls had begun to elongate, stretching the hall into what could have been a pathway into infinity. The way vanished into an awesome blackness. She glanced back and forth, between her weeping boyfriend and the unknown void, and it would have been easy to step into the waiting room and take Pepper's hand and return to Salem. But she knew Salem would not be there, at least not as a city filled with people. If she chose that route, she would once more step back into Betty Sue's wicked reality. Yet there was nothing in the void that drew her. In fact, its sheer awesomeness frightened her. She wavered at the doorway, uncertain. Something Betty Sue said came back to her right then. Words in Betty Sue's bedroom at the end of the story. "This is the difference between you and me. You had only one story to tell. I have millions." Betty Sue would just torture the 5 of them all over again, Roxanne thought. The witch would mix up the plot, and the suffering would come at them from different and unexpected directions. It was a hopeless path to go to Pepper, she saw, much as she wanted to. Yet, she desperately needed to talk to him, just once more, if only to say goodbye. But she knew she couldn't without great risk. She knew if she so much as stepped into the waiting room, as she had done before, they would both be caught in Betty Sue's web. There was nothing to be done, and it was so terribly sad. "Goodbye, my love," she whispered to him. She had said too many goodbyes for one day. Her heart heavy, she turned and walked back down the hallway. She scarcely paused as she passed the operating room. The doctor had exhausted all his skills. The nurse was calling out the poor girl's blood pressure readings. The numbers were sinking fast. Blood soaked the floor in dark puddles. The doctor stopped and stepped back from the table, as if he were afraid that whatever inexplicable fate had struck his patient would strike him next. He ripped the surgical mask off his face and wiped at the sweat pouring into his eyes. The numbers went flat. The girl's eyes were closed, her face composed. "She's gone," the doctor said solemnly. "I am going," Roxanne said. She walked forward, and the first steps were the hardest. She thought of all the things she was leaving behind, and was almost tempted to retreat, to go around the circle one more time with Pepper and her friends, even if it meant unimaginable suffering. But then suddenly, unexpectedly, the darkness softened. As she reached the supposed end of the hall and passed beyond it, she was encompassed in a wonderful light, where she saw many rich colors and heard many wonderful sounds. Sounds that had nothing to do with the hymn that Betty Sue had sung to catch her unfortunate butterflies. In that moment, Roxanne felt as if she had stepped into the center of all things, where the light of the stars shone bright, and the ending of every story was joyful. Pepper heard Roxanne scream of pain but remained in his seat, praying feverishly. He did not understand how things could have gone bad so quickly. Everything he had read about abortions had said it was a relatively easy procedure. Once more he cursed himself for putting Roxanne through such torment. He swore when he got her out of there, he would make it up to her if it took him the rest of his life. He was very serious about her. From the first night they had gone out, he had thought she would one day be his wife. Several minutes crept by. They could have been hours. Then Pepper thought he heard Roxanne's voice. Even more strange, as he glanced up, he thought he saw her standing in the doorway that led back to the operating rooms. But it couldn't have been her because he could see right through her. When he blinked, she was gone, yet the sound of her voice hung softly in the air, so soft that he heard it in his heart and not with his ears, a whisper of love, a whispered goodbye. "Rox," he called. "Goodbye, my love. Be wary of the witch." Pepper got up and hurried through the door. He didn't care what the nurse and doctor said. He had to find out what was happening to his girl. He found out all too soon. She rested on the operating table, her legs down from the stirrups, her lower body covered with white towels that slowly turned dark red as he looked on. Her face was pale beyond belief, and she lay as still as a fallen statue. "Is she dying?" Pepper cried, and stepped into the operating room. The doctor looked over at the nurse. "What is he doing here?" "Come on, son," the nurse said, taking him by the arm. "You cannot be in here. The doctor is working." Pepper shook her off and stepped forward. The doctor wasn't working anymore. He had already given up. He was covering Roxanne's face with a sheet now. Pepper reached out and stopped him. He touched her red hair, the side of her cold face. She lay on her back with her eyes closed. Pepper leaned over and listened at her lips for the faintest sound of breath, but he couldn't even catch a whisper of life. "Oh, baby," he moaned, and put his arms around her and hugged her and kissed her, but she didn't stir. "Oh, Rox, what have I done to you?" The doctor put his hand on Pepper's shoulder. "I'm sorry, son," he said with feeling. "I don't know what happened. She just started bleeding, and I couldn't stop it. I've never seen anything like it." Pepper stood up straight and looked at the man. "She wanted to keep the baby, you know. I talked her out of it." The doctor nodded. "I understand how that must make you feel, but you couldn't have known this would happen." Pepper thought of Betty Sue, how she had also died after being with him. An unseen curse was at work here, he thought. It would come for him next. He only prayed it didn't wait long. He deserved to die. He glanced one last time at Roxanne. She had been the best thing that had ever happened to him. "Yeah, I should have known," Pepper said. Pepper walked out of the operating room and left the clinic. He got in Roxanne's car and drove home. It was early, still pretty dark. He drove fast and didn't see anyone on the highway until sunrise, when he spotted a hitchhiker standing beside the road in the middle of the desert. It was a young woman with long red hair and a black cape that reached to her feet. He didn't want to stop for her. The loss of Roxanne lay heavy on his heart, like a mountain of frozen lead, but the girl was alone, and he feared she could be in danger once the sun was in the sky and the temperature rose. He pulled the car over to the side of the road. He watched as she collected a black bag at her feet and slowly walked toward him. "Can I have a ride?" she asked, leaning in the open passenger side window. She was attractive. Her red hair shone like a torch and her green eyes danced as she spoke. It was funny, he thought. She even looked familiar, although he was sure he had never seen her before. He would have remembered someone like her. She smiled, a mouth full of white teeth. "Please." "Sure." He leaned over and opened the door for her. She climbed in and set her black bag on the car floor between her black boots. "Where are you heading?" he asked. "Salem," she said. He put the car in gear and they rolled forward. "That's where I'm from. I can give you a ride there if you like." "Oh, I like that very much." "How did you happen to be out here in the middle of nowhere? Did your car break down?" "No," she giggled. "It caught fire. I was barely able to get out alive." "That's a shame." He fought back a spasm of grief. He was not going to cry in front of a complete stranger. It was going to be hard having company right now. He forced himself to offer his hand, and he had to fight to keep it from shaking. "My name's Pepper." She squeezed his hand. Her touch was cool and slimy. He assumed she had recently rubbed some kind of lotion on her skin. "I'm Beetle," she said. He took his hand back quickly. "Is that a first name or a last?" Not that he cared. She grinned. "It's both." She opened her black bag and began to take out an assortment of odds and ends. She laid them on her lap. A cigarette, 2 bullet shells, an open razor, and a stainless steel fork. Pepper followed her actions out of the corner of his eye. She picked up the fork and played with the metal prongs with the tips of her fingers. "You know," she said, "I appreciate your giving me this ride. I'd like to make it up to you somehow." She paused and stretched her body into a more upright position. "Could I cook you dinner tonight?" Pepper shook his head. He knew he wouldn't be eating today, or tomorrow for that matter. He couldn't imagine doing anything for the rest of his life except thinking about Roxanne. What was he going to tell her father? "I'm sorry," he said. "I'm busy." She nodded, then smiled, as if he had said yes instead of no. Then she reached over and poked him in the side with her fork. It hurt, and he jerked the wheel and almost sent the car off the road. "Hey," he said, "stop that." "I'm sorry," she said sincerely. Then she was silent for a moment before saying, "Are you sure I can't talk you into it?" He wished he hadn't picked her up. "I am quite sure." She smiled again, unconcerned. Once more he was struck by how familiar she looked. That brilliant red hair. There was something he was missing here. He was confident in time he would remember where he had seen her before. He watched as she picked up her things and put them back in her black bag. "And I am quite sure I will change your mind," she said sweetly. They drove toward Salem. This has been a Nightfall Audiobooks production of Whisper of Death by Christopher Pike. Hi, this is Chris again with Nightfall Audiobooks, and I thank you for joining me for my production of Whisper of Death by Christopher Pike. I hope you enjoyed this book as much as I did. I don't call this a horror story, I call this a terror story. Would you want to be stuck in this kind of situation, where it's an endless loop and time just continues and continues and continues like Groundhog Day? No, I wouldn't. I have read this book maybe 20 times now. A few things are very certain. Betty Sue McCormick is absolutely a witch. Somehow she was able to use her pregnancy and Roxanne's to screw tight the lid of her butterfly jar to capture 5 souls to do with whatever she pleased. And that's terrifying, that someone as capable as just being a writer is able to take 5 souls and control them in a pocket dimension to do with whatever she pleases until she decides to let them all go. But then where does she go when that's all over? How does she resolve? Is there any hope for anyone else to get out of this situation? I don't know. In the epilogue, it looks like Roxanne is the only one who remembers what had happened before and makes a conscious decision to not continue and keep on going around this merry-go-round one more time. And it looks like she gets to heaven. And what about the other 4 people? They are now doomed to live in this reality with Betty Sue torturing them for all eternity? Again, how do they all get out? And where does Betty Sue go when she's done? I don't know. I can't answer those questions, and I really wish I could. While I really enjoy Christopher Pike and his unique writing style, if I do one more novel, it might be Witch. But that's it. Do not ask me to do the Last Vampire series. Do not ask me to do Remember Me, or any of his other material. I have a large chunk of his catalog, and I've read it all at least once. But I am not as nostalgic for Pike as I am about Stein. The Last Vampire series is his magnum opus for sure, and books 1 through 6 are fantastic. Books 7 and 8, they're really, really long and they're not that good, but I've read them and I own them. Part of the mission statement for this channel is to provide audiobooks that aren't already available in audio format. The Last Vampire series is absolutely available in audio format. I've listened to books 1 through 3, and they are very, very well done. I can't wait to get my hands on books 4, 5, and 6, because those are my favorite in that set. I would love to discuss this book at length in the comments section below, or you can always send me an email, nightfallaudiobooks@gmail.com. And on that note, what should I do next? I don't know. Send me an email, or find me on YouTube at Nightfall Audiobooks. I love your comments. I'd love to see what you have to say. I love your requests. Please send them all my way. I also have a Patreon page, patreon.com/nightfallaudiobooks. Any help would be greatly appreciated. So tell your friends, tell your mom, tell whoever you think would like to listen to me. Tell them tales from 90s young adult horror. Thank you very much for listening, and I will see you next time.